Hi, welcome back to another video. And today I'll be talking about the good polling numbers we are seeing for the Democrats, and not just that, but also some special elections. A special election that took place last night, and why Democrats are constantly seeing good news when it comes down to special elections. Now, we are seeing in this 2026 generic congressional vote that the Democrats are performing in these polls fairly well. That is not only because they are the opposition party, but it probably because they kind of serve as an upset to the Trump administration. And we are seeing from pollsters now. I've expressed my dislike for real clear politics before, where I've argued there are some Republican, where there are some conservative or liberal bias polls here. However, there's only a couple conservative ones. Like there's News Nation, there's Rasmussen. Sometimes there's also some liberal PACs in here, which I also don't like. But so far we aren't really seeing any Republican or Democrat backed PACs here kind of attempting to manipulate these polls here. But there are a couple, biased ones that lean towards the conservatives here, but not enough where it really affects the, over polling. So what we are seeing here is almost a 3-point lead for the Democratic Party when it comes down to, these pollsters. And there are some pretty good pollsters here. I will give credit. Intel predicted that President Trump was going to win the election November of 2024, and they were correct. Trump won the election 2024. YouGov, however, they were wrong that they did say that Harris was going to win, and they were wrong, but they are a B-rated poll, or a B-plus rated poll. So they have a lot of good polls. They've been right about a lot of elections. Just 2024 was not one of them. Rasmussen has been utterly horrible. News Nation, I wouldn't trust. But actually, Fox News also has, despite being conservative biased, they've actually produced a fair amount of good polls, and I actually trust them a lot. So you're seeing a lot of these polls where you have like The Economist YouGov having Democrats up by 2 points, or at last intel, Democrats being up by 9 points. Even Rasmussen having Democrats up by 1. There's a tie here. The big data poll is the only one who has Republicans up 2, but most of these are for the Democrats. And like I said, I don't think this is because this is an opposition, or not just because they're the opposition party, but I think it's mainly that the American people are expressing frustrations within President Trump. And despite the unpopularity of the Democratic Party as a whole, there are a lot more anger towards, I think, President Trump's policies and what the administration is doing, rather than the, dislike of the leaders within the Democratic Party. And I think we're going to continue to see that as you could point out to the last administration under the Biden administration, you could point out to the exact thing where, yes, there were some dislikes within the leader of the Republican or the leaders within the Republican Party. However, what the Biden administration were doing was not favorable at all to the American people. They were upset with it, and they ended up voting for President Trump in 2024, despite the Biden administration against Kamala Harris, who at the time was Biden's vice president. So, yeah, we really are seeing a repeat here. And I mean, you can go back in history, to when Gerald Ford lost re-election, to when Jimmy Carter lost re-election, to when Bush lost re-election, even when Trump lost re-election in 2020. You can really, come back to this. And in 2021, right, we saw Republicans perform very well in the polls. We saw them winning special elections. Their anti-Biden messaging was working very well, and they were able to really start winning lots and lots of elections here. And now we are seeing the same thing. Look at this polling for Democrats, right? The Real Clear Politics average has Democrats up by 2 points. Now, really, that isn't much here, but it is here it is. So the congressional vote also had that for Republicans in 2024, where they had the Republicans up in the final results by 2 points. The average was under half a point, which was kind of close here, but overall, Republicans had a small majority of a 2-point, results in the 2024 elections, and the average was Republicans leading by 0.3 points, above the Democrats here. So almost fairly accurate, I guess you could say, where during the final months of the campaign, the Democrats and the Republicans went back and forth, but in the end, Republicans came out victorious here. And I think we're going to see the same thing, however, but just with the Democrats, where despite the Democrats being unpopular, despite their leaders also being very unpopular, President Trump is viewed more unfavorably. And a lot of the policies and a lot of the messaging that's being done within the White House and the Trump administration are not just being viewed unfavorable to the American people, but are just not what they believe they voted for, and they are going to be expressing more outrage with the Trump administration and within the Republican Party as a whole. And this is why we're seeing the Republicans perform so poorly in these polling. And not just that, but also with special elections. Now, there was a special election in South Carolina that happened yesterday or last night, and we see a clear rejection of the Republican Party here. Now, I get what you're saying. There's only 3,671 people who voted in this election yesterday. It's a very, very low populated, election. Just 3,000 people does not make up much of the country. However, this type of thing, right? This type of special election, we've gone from a special election after special election, for months now under this new Trump administration, where we are constantly seeing Republicans lose and lose and lose. And it is the exact same thing we saw happen to the Democrats in 2021, where they were constantly having special elections and the Democrats were underperforming, they were losing to the Republicans, and now it's the other way around. Because in 2021, or I should say towards the end of the summer and then the beginning of the fall of 2021, Democrats had a very unpopular incumbent president. And now we are also seeing the same with Republicans, where as of right now, the Republicans, even though it's much earlier than, 4 years ago, the Republicans have a very unpopular incumbent president. And the American people, despite, might not, they're not voting because they agree with the policies that the Democrats support, or they love their leaders or anything like that. They are only voting for the Democrats because the Democrats are just the clear opposition, and it's a protest vote. And it sends a message to the Republican Party. Now, for the Republican Party to listen to that message is their choice, but to ignore it is a problem within itself. Where if this sort of thing continues, there will be more of a concern, I think, that grows and grows within the Republican Party. And if that concern is ignored, then the Republican Party will face the defeat that the Democrats faced in 2024, but they will be facing it in 2026. And we are already constantly seeing this polling here that is going very favorably to the Democrats. +2, +9, +1, +5, +3, +7. The only one has Republicans +2, and that is a big data poll, right? All the other A-plus pollsters are showing good signs for the Democrats. If this sort of thing continues, the Republicans are probably not going to have a good night in 2026. This all comes not just within, the big beautiful bill that President Trump is trying to pass, and some Senate Republicans are feeling uncomfortable for it. But, we are now seeing special elections, right? Like this one, where the Democrat wins by a landslide. This is a landslide win, despite it being so low populated. And reminder, this election, Kamala Harris won this special, this state house, the 50th state house, right, in South Carolina, by 5 points. Look at how much the Democrat wins it by, 70.6. That to call it, it is a it is a big overperformance for the Democrats. It is a huge overperformance, and it is a big win. To win it by 5 points, would be a win, but to win it by 70 is a pure victory, and it is what Republicans have been calling a mandate that the Democrats probably would want to start calling it, because that's what this looks like. That's what this looks like. And like I said, if this sort of thing continues, it is going to grow more and more of a concern within the Republican Party. And, I predict this sort of thing will continue, especially if President Trump gets any more unpopular. Let me find his approval rating. Here we go. Especially if President Trump gets any more unpopular. Now, like I've mentioned, President Trump's approval rating has bounced back a bit. His highest, the lowest his approval rating has gotten was 45%. Highest his disapproval was 52%, and now his disapproval has shrunk. His approval rating has gone back up to 47%. His disapproval dropping below 50%, and that is the type of thing the Trump administration and the White House definitely wants to see. Where you now have Trump's disapproval, instead of being, in the 50s, now below 50% at 49.7%, his approval being at 47.5%. And sure, President Trump is not as popular as he was during the beginning of his term, right? When he had a +6 approval rating, where his approval was at 50%, his disapproval was at 44%, and sure, that approval rating quickly collapsed. But at least it is not where it was back in April when he was disapproved by over 7 points. And now he is only disapproved by 2 points. And I think this proves that President Trump has the ability to really turn his approval rating around. And we're already seeing it happen. But, it could always go the other way. And I think that when we continue to see these special elections go for the Democrats, these polling going for the Democrats, and Trump still remaining sort of unpopular here, I think we're going to continue to see this. We're going to see this for the next few months, and it is only going to probably get worse. However, it could always turn around, but until then, we have much more to see, and we are still very early from 2026, and we'll see how it goes. But anyways, that is the video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.